country on one side, close to the entrance lodge of a great park, where lived my Lord and Lady Cumnor, the Earl and the Countess, as they were always called by the inhabitants of the town, where a very pretty amount of feudal feeling still lingered, and showed itself in a number of simple ways, droll enough to look back upon, but serious matters of importance at the time. It was before the passing of the Reform Bill, but a good deal of liberal talk took place occasionally between 2 or 3 of the more enlightened freeholders living in Hollingford. And there was a great Tory family in the county who, from time to time, came forward and contested the election with the rival Whig family of Cumnor. One would have thought that the above-mentioned liberal-talking inhabitants would have at least admitted the possibility of their voting for the Healey-Harrison, who represented their own opinions, and thus trying to vindicate their independence. But no such thing. The Earl was lord of the manor, and owner of much of the land on which Hollingford was built. He and his household were fed and doctored and, to a certain measure, clothed by the good people of the town. Their fathers' grandfathers had always voted for the eldest son of Cumnor Towers, and following in the ancestral track, every man jack in the place gave his vote to the liege lord, totally irrespective of such chimeras as political opinion. This was no unusual instance of the influence of the great landowners over humbler neighbours in those days before railways, and it was well for a place where the powerful family who thus overshadowed it were of so respectable a character as the Cumnors. They expected to be submitted to and obeyed. The simple worship of the townspeople was accepted by the Earl and Countess as a right, and they would have stood still in amazement, and with a horrid memory of the French sans-culottes who were the bugbears of their youth, had any inhabitant of Hollingford ventured to set his will or opinions in opposition to those of the Earl. But, yielded all that obeisance, they did a good deal for the town, and were generally condescending, and often thoughtful and kind in their treatment of their vassals. Lord Cumnor was a forbearing landlord, putting his steward a little on one side sometimes, and taking the reins into his own hands now and then, much to the annoyance of the agent, who was, in fact, too rich and independent to care greatly for preserving a post where his decisions might any day be overturned by my lord's taking a fancy to go pottering, as the agent irreverently expressed it in the sanctuary of his own home, which, being interpreted, meant that occasionally the Earl asked his own questions of his own tenants, and used his own eyes and ears in the management of the smaller details of his property. But his tenants liked my lord all the better for this habit of his. Lord Cumnor had certainly a little time for gossip, which he contrived to combine with the failing of personal intervention between the old land steward and the tenantry. But then the Countess made up by her unapproachable dignity for this weakness of the Earl's. Once a year she was condescending. She and the ladies, her daughters, had set up a school. Not a school after the manner of schools nowadays, where far better intellectual teaching is given to the boys and girls of labourers and workpeople than often falls to the lot of their betters in worldly estate, but a school of the kind we should call industrial, where girls are taught to sew beautifully, to be capital housemaids and pretty fair cooks, and above all to dress neatly in a kind of charity uniform devised by the ladies of Cumnor Towers: white caps, white tippets, check aprons, blue gowns, and ready curtsies, and "Please, ma'ams," being de rigueur. Now, as the Countess was absent from the Towers for a considerable part of the year, she was glad to enlist the sympathy of the Hollingford ladies in this school, with a view to obtaining their aid as visitors during the many months that she and her daughters were away. And the various unoccupied gentlewomen of the town responded to the call of their liege lady, and gave her their service as required, and along with it a great deal of whispered and fussy admiration. "How good of the Countess! So like the dear Countess, always thinking of others," and so on, while it was always supposed that no